everyone, and welcome to another one of our Entrepreneur Expat interviews. We have a real treat for you today because we have a new YouTube friend and fellow Cuban American expat in Mexico, Jose Arteaga, with us today. Some of you may recognize him because he has quite the YouTube channel about living in Merida, Mexico, and because you get both me and Justin on an interview today. So usually you just see one of us on an interview. But today, for this guest, we're like, nope, we both need to be on here. So thank you so much, Jose, for coming on to share about your experience. You have quite a story in moving to Mexico and ending up in Merida, and you're a big proponent of Mexico. Thank you for coming on and sharing that experience with us because, I mean, all three of us know this. Like, the crazier things have been getting in the United States lately, the more all our channels keep growing. So this is a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to sharing my story about how I ended up out here and how you guys can also end up out here if that's what you're looking for, which is probably leaving the USA and becoming independent and looking for that freedom, correct?
Absolutely. So I'd love to jump in and just hear a little bit more about your story. We already know this kind of listening to your channel, but I'd love it if you can share with our viewers just a very interesting story of how you ended up being in Mexico in the first place, because it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, well, again, it's a super long story, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in Miami, and about 10, 11, 12 years ago, I left Miami and I traveled all over the USA. I lived all over the US, and I never was able to fit in anywhere. I was just leaving Miami because I didn't fit in there, or things were just not going as I planned. I lived in other places. Things started going better, but the reality was I never fit in. It was something about it, and I eventually ended up out here in Mexico and found out this is my home. But how did I end up here in Mexico? Well, I was living in LA. Things weren't going so hot, and I basically needed to find a way out. I needed to find, basically a roof over my head. As you guys already know, things are very tough in the USA these days. They were tough even 6.5 years ago when I left. But the reality is that I was basically, falling on some hard times, and I had to find a new place to live. I was living with a bunch of roommates. I know I'm a bit too old for that kind of stuff, but it is what it is, right? You got to keep pushing forward. And I decided, all right, I can't find another place to live out here in LA. I can't find a good enough situation for me to continue living my life out here in the USA. I was already pretty much, well versed on the direction that the country was going in. It wasn't going well. Again, Cuban, my parents are Cuban. They come from communism. I had a bit of some knowledge as to what was coming down the pike. And I saw that, again, the USA wasn't going in the right direction. And I said, all right, I got to get out of here. So I basically put my finger on a map, and I picked a few spots, where I wanted to end up. I looked at Argentina. I looked at Spain. I looked at a bunch of places. But at the end of the day, the only place that, was a right fit for me, the place where I ended up landing, was out here in Merida, Yucatan. And a lot of people always ask me, well, Jose, how did you end up out here in Merida? Long story short, I basically just put my finger on the map, and I landed here. Because I could have easily just gone into Tijuana. I could have crossed the border and just kind of landed anywhere. But at that point in my life, I didn't have much left, all right? Again, like I said, I was going through some hard times. I don't want to bore you guys out here with all the details. But I had to basically find a place to live, and I only had like $1,500 to my name, all right? That's basically it. And so when I was looking into Mexico, I basically found a website out there that would tell you all the places to live in the world, and they basically organized everything through cost of living. And one of the first places I saw that was in Mexico was Merida, Yucatan. And immediately I was like, all right, this place is so dirt cheap. It must be, very dangerous. It must be cartel haven out here. It must be horrible. But I said, yeah, let me at least click on it. Let me look at it. Let me see what's out there. And as soon as I clicked on Merida, Yucatan, I was, in shock by how amazingly beautiful this place was, how safe it was, how similar it was to how I grew up in Miami. The weather, the culture, so many things. Again, we're just a stone's throw away from Cuba, from Miami, from Cancun. It's right next door. So just to give perspective on for people out there that don't know where I'm at the moment. And so I said, you know what, F it. I don't really got much to lose. And I said, it's either live on the street, live out of my car, or just move to another country. So that's it. I just basically packed my bags, found an Airbnb, did a little basic research, and within a couple weeks, I came out here and I landed out here. And basically, as soon as I landed out here, I started to document, my story. I started to document how everything was going for me, because at that point, before I even moved to Mexico, I started doing some research. I was like, all right, let me see if I can find some YouTube videos. Let me see if I can find some information out there on people that have already moved to Mexico or living in Mexico. See if I can find some information. I couldn't find anything. So immediately, my brain, had a little light bulb moment, the entrepreneur aspect of, our lives. And I was like, all right, well, wait a minute. Since nobody's covering this and nobody's going to be covering it from my angle, basically you're just one step away from being on the street, which is a lot of Americans these days, not to their fault. It's just basically the way things are at the moment. And so I was like, all right, you know what? I kind of see where this is all heading. Let me go on ahead and start documenting this for, better or for worse. At the end of the day, I could at least, teach people what they can do and not do, and learn from my experiences, from my failures, from my mistakes, from my successes, all that stuff. And I put the channel together where basically I was just recording myself day to day, and eventually it grew into what I have now, where I'm just basically out here trying to pay it forward, trying to provide as much useful information for anyone out there that's looking to move out here. Now, the people that watch my channel, watch my content, they come from all income levels, all ages, all kinds of backgrounds. But the one constant, thing that, has remained basically has been the fact that it's not easy, and it doesn't matter, what your situation is. And so I'm just, I've learned, from, just being a former chef, a former leader, of men, in the kitchen, and just kind of going through all that difficulty and living a difficult life. I just said, you know what, let me start taking a lot of these people, basically my audience, under my wing, and teaching them, showing them, guiding them, okay, without charging anything. I'm not here trying to sell anything. I'm just basically, I want to show people that it can be done. If you, again, it's just like anything else. Look, I used to be extremely overweight. And at the end of the day, you can look at a bunch of videos on how to lose weight. Or you got to go out there and do some push-ups and stop eating so many Twinkies. It's as simple as that. So it's the same thing. I was just not just giving them information, but giving them useful information so that they can finally make that decision, so that they can finally, say, all right, I can do this. I can make this happen. This is what I got to do. This is what I should avoid. This is the steps I got to, whatever. These are the things I got to do, because again, everyone's in a different situation. And so nothing, it basically, throughout the years, it's grown into what it is today. But when I first came out here, I came out here with the dream of, I wanted to be a YouTuber. Yeah, I know, kind of crazy, right? But back then, I was just working in kitchens, and I was doing Uber. I was just basically doing all kinds of gig jobs to just stay afloat. Again, not to any fault of my own. I had some situations that happened in my life where I lost everything and I had to start, from the ground up again. But because I've done it multiple times, I was just trying to teach people, and how they can do it, because everyone's going to eventually fall because of whatever reason. Life happens, right? Things happen. So it's all about, all right, what can I do to help other people? And at the same time, it was a little bit of a cathartic thing for me, where I got to, basically, go on YouTube, do a live stream, and basically talk, basically, use it as therapy. All right, I'm just going to, put all this information out there. And it was surprising to me how much it was helping people. So basically, when I was in LA, I didn't have much of a choice, in the sense of like, look, I wanted to continue making videos. I wanted to continue living this crazy life. I wanted to be a creator. I wanted to do all this stuff. I didn't want to cook anymore. I didn't want to drive Uber. I didn't want to work for the man. I didn't want to do any of these things. So I was, again, working as hard as I could to get this to get that channel going. And it
What
was
was
just
it that made you want to do that? Like, what was the turning point for you where you're like, look, I don't want to live this hustle life where I'm not doing things that are fulfilling to me. Like, I'm curious, where was the point for you where you're like, screw it, I'm not
Man, okay,
going
I'm
to
glad
take
you
that
asked that.
anymore.
Okay, yeah. Because again, I have such a long story. It's like I was just trying to cut it short. It actually happened when I was living in Seattle. So when I was living in Seattle, I was up there and I was, I had a great chef job. I was doing, living the dream in a sense. I mean, I was doing pretty good. But then what happened, which was something that happened to me a lot, is just like I just never fit in. I was a great employee. I would bring in the money. I would do all this stuff, but I just didn't fit into the culture. Whatever it is. I'm a little bit of a unique spirit, I guess. And eventually, it didn't matter how hard I worked or what I did. I just didn't fit in. And so basically, I got fired. From my job. But again, just being the entrepreneurial minded individual, I used to have businesses, and back in Miami, I used to do all kinds of things. That day that I got fired, I'll never forget it. I literally went home, okay, and I started a business, all right? And that business was in consulting. And I was in Seattle at the moment. This is already I want to say 8-10 years ago. And I was in, in the middle of Silicon Valley too. Silicon Valley, one is San Francisco, that area. But Seattle's also Silicon Valley. That's where Amazon is. That's where Microsoft is, and I could go on and on. But at that time, there was a lot of people up there. They were, how do I say this? They were earning money, from working for Amazon or Facebook or whatever. And then a lot of people were like, all right, I don't want to do this forever. Let me start a business. Let me start, becoming an entrepreneur. Let me start doing these things. Even the, how do I say this? The herbal medicine business. I don't know what I can say on your channel or not, but the MJ business, you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That was a big thing there because it started to get legalized. So I was like, all right, this is something I can help people with, because at the end of the day, I helped make money for a lot of people in the restaurant industry, which is extremely difficult. I mean, come on, how can I, how difficult could it be to sell a joint? I don't know what else to say. And other things, there were people that had pretty good products and things or whatever, or really crappy products. But at the end of the day, it was just that voice of reason. Like, hey, this is probably not a good idea. Maybe sell this, or maybe do this. Or, hey, maybe don't smoke all your profits. You know what I mean? Maybe leave some for the customers, just basic business, just, I wasn't really doing much, but I was earning money, and there was a lot of money flowing out there. So I just got into that. And eventually it didn't take that long where I was like, oh man, I don't want to go back to the kitchen. I don't want to go, work for the man. Are you kidding me? I'm helping people right now. It makes me feel good. I'm earning money. I'm doing great. This is awesome. But eventually down, as a few years passed, as I was doing that, I was like, I can't do this forever. My heart wasn't really into it. And then one day, my really, really, really good friend, he basically was finishing his master's degree at the local university for film. And he asked me, he goes, hey, Jose, do you know how to work a camera? I'm like, yeah, of course I know how to work a camera, because my family used to do photography and all this stuff back in the day. But I hadn't, really worked with anything like that in so long. So he goes, hey, can you help me? I need to shoot something, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, no problem. Let's go, let's go to the park and shoot whatever. Anyways, the minute that I grabbed the camera and I started filming and I started taking pictures, and then we brought it back and I started, using Premiere Pro, started editing for the first time, because I used to edit back in the day with videotapes. You remember with VCRs and putting the tape in and cutting it. And yeah, I used to do all that back when I was a kid. So when I was introduced to being able to edit on a computer, and it was just, click, point, very, very easy, I fell in love with it immediately. I was like a little kid playing with Legos all over again. So I got into it, and I never stopped. At first I was just making videos about, technology, about whatever, whatever was in my mind. I was going down that rabbit hole, that eventually led me now to live in Mexico. And I started educating myself, and I started, seeing all this stuff, what was really going on. I was in the middle of, that tech world, and I was like, all right, let me, just continue making videos. This is fun. I started making cooking videos. I started doing all this, and it was just before I knew it, I was obsessed. And that's when I knew. I was like, all right, this is it. But I knew also that I was so far away from being a success. Again, I had 15 subscribers, 30 subscribers. I don't know.
What are you at
But
now? Just to give people some
now I'm like
perspective.
close to 24,000. You know what I mean? But this is, I'm in multiple channels. This is like my original channel, which has been banned off of YouTube already in a sense because, speaking too many things that they don't like for,
Too many truths. Yep.
too many truths, which by the way, now you can speak these things and, the censorship gods aren't, really going against it. But anyways, long story short, I fell in love with all that. I fell in love with, making movies, little mini movies, vlogs, whatever. And eventually, what happened was that like when I was living in LA, just to keep my sanity after losing everything, I'm just skipping a bunch of things here, just going fast forward here. The one constant that remained in my life was making videos. And I was just making videos. And again, at that time when I was living in Seattle, I was living in a penthouse, right in front of the Space Needle, amazing. I was making good
You
money.
had the typical I have it all American dream
That's right.
thing.
That's right. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah. And you can see it in my videos. You know what I mean? I was
Yeah.
like, but I wasn't really that happy. And then when I ended up in LA, I was living with a bunch of people, and I had a room to myself and I was making videos out of that room. And I was just every day, that was my constant thing that was bringing me happiness, making those videos. So when I eventually moved to Mexico, again, I had no choice. I had to move out here. When I eventually moved to Mexico, immediately I picked up the camera and immediately I just started, putting all my knowledge, all my experience, all my everything into that one thing, which was, all right, let me make some videos and let me teach people, how I'm doing it. And again, part of teaching is also, showing people what not to do. And I figured, well, this is great because I'm going to be making a lot of mistakes. At the very least, it'll be entertaining, to see me, go through all this difficulty. And then, I just started building the channel based off of, basically you got to leave the USA because the crap is going to hit the fan. And then once you leave the USA, look, this is the difficulty and this is the life that you're going to be probably expecting abroad. For some of you guys, it's going to be great. For some of you guys, it's not going to be so great. But regardless, this is what it's like out here. And I just continued doing that. And I would freelance, I would, edit videos for people. I would be on Craigslist. I would find clients and customers all over the place. I got referrals, all that stuff. And so just all that combined was enough, barely enough to get me, the income I needed in order to survive out here. But eventually, the channel itself became so popular and so helpful to so many people that was bringing me the income where I didn't have to rely on being a freelancer or anything like that. And again, long story short, just by doing what I loved and putting in that work and sacrifice. I've been doing this 9 years. In October, it's going to be 9 years since I've been on YouTube. And now is when I'm really starting to see the fruits of my labors and by doing what I love, not necessarily doing something I didn't love to make the money, get the views. No, just doing what I love, which was, basically talking to the audience and like I'm doing now and sharing with them my life, my experience, and I'm helping them out, how, they can, transition over here.
There are so many things about this story that I absolutely love. So one of the things I love about the story is, a lot of people like to have their 5-year plans, their 10-year plans. We'll see in the comments all the time. I'm sure you see it. They're like, yeah, my moving to Mexico plan is like in 5 years. And I know you've been talking about this as well as we have, is like, you may not have 5 years with the way things are going.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that momentarily. But the fact that you took risks, you've taken a lot of risks, and a lot of people are just too scared to do that stuff. They're waiting for everything to be perfect or for all that ducks to be in a row. When I got here, I was in the middle of a huge business and finance and career transition. Massive. I wasn't making money like I was before because I went through a similar thing that you did where I was like, fuck all this, basically. He was as well. Like there was no perfection. There was no all the ducks in a row. It was just buy the plane ticket and go. And this is where life and the universe is moving you toward, and everything's going to be okay, which takes massive amounts of courage and faith. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you. Look, and I'm glad that you brought that up, okay? I'm really, really, really happy you brought that up because, look, I'll tell you straight up. I was planning on leaving the USA a long time ago before I eventually did. In fact, when I was in Seattle, when I had money in my pocket, when I had all the resources, when I had everything going for me. And I could have landed out here and really, been able to lift up really quickly, really easily. I didn't do it because I was scared. Look, I say it all the time. I did not have the balls to do it. And why was it? Well, because, I was always a person that, man, I was literally born in a trailer park, and then I was a cook for a living. Okay. So it wasn't like I was, making a lot of money throughout my whole career or anything like that. I went down that route because, well, that's what I was most satisfied with. I didn't want to, work in an office, put on a suit and tie. I would rather just be, shooting the shit in the kitchen with my homies and drinking beer and, whatever. So that's a career path I ended up choosing. And when I eventually, again, I started doing what I told you in Seattle, and I started making money and living, the American dream. I was afraid to lose it. I was afraid.
That's really common.
Yeah.
That is so common.
And so that was the fear. That was a major fear that basically that's why I didn't move. I could have been in out here maybe 10 years ago. You know what I mean? But I didn't do it because I was just scared. I didn't have the balls to do it. I was always thinking, what if? And it's always, you convince yourself. This is what I try to tell people. It's like, you are your worst enemy. And you gotta, again, you gotta talk to yourself, and you gotta have these deep conversations with yourself. But at the end of the day, I was always creating excuses, as to why I'm not going to move to Mexico. Oh, it's dangerous. Oh, what am I going to do about a job? It's like, I didn't need a job. I had money, you know what I mean? Or what about, It's always something, you know what I mean? It was always, but at the end of the day, it always stemmed down to, I didn't want to lose the little that I had, the little that I finally, had. But guess what? Life is, it has a funny way of showing, life is funny. All right. Life is a funny way of showing you how things are. Right?
It was a lesson you had to learn because you were so afraid of losing everything, and then you did lose everything, and then now you're like, okay, I survived, I'm good, and I have all the resources available, just build everything back up again and do better next time. Yeah. Every entrepreneur who's been around as long as we have has a story like that.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, how I lost everything. Look, I mean, whatever, we're on the subject already. I was basically driving to see family, all right? I was it's still in Seattle, or not in Seattle. I was in Vegas. I was living in Vegas at the moment. And I was just driving across the country to Miami to go see the family, see, my sister, the kids, whatever. And so I went over there to, drive out there. And on my drive over there, I got pulled over in Texas. And I don't want to get into it. You guys already know it's Texas, all right? Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't have a good experience with Texas. I was literally in the middle of nowhere, North Texas, and they arrested me. They wrongfully, put me through the whole ringer. And I remember that first night that I was in jail. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I say it all the time. I say it all the time when I'm telling the story, but up until that point, I was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was too scared to move to Mexico. I was just kind of wallowing about. But that night, the first night I was in jail, and I was just, they turned off all the lights. I'm just there with all the, prisoners in the thing.
That's gotta be scary. Oh
I mean, it kind of was, but not really, because again, as a cook, as a chef, for me, it's like, these are the guys I used to hire. I'm not going to lie. I mean, again, I ain't go, it's a whole story. I was actually, more physical and more aggressive with the police that arrested me than when they put me in jail. When they put me in jail, that's when I started to calm down. All right. In fact, the guys in the jail, they saw the crazy Cuban coming in there, yelling at the cops and, and all this other stuff. And, long story short, what I mean? I became friends with them really quickly, but I digress. Like I said, that first night, I was there. I went to sleep. You ever seen the movie My Cousin Vinny when he was in jail and, there was like the riot, in the jail. And that's when he was able to finally get some sleep.
Yeah.
Okay. So being in that position, being in that situation, I literally, I was laying in that cot thing that they give you, and I was looking up at my, the upper bunk, there's somebody else up there. But I was just like there thinking to myself, oh my God, I cannot believe the situation I'm in right now. I cannot believe I'm in this situation. But at the same time, it's like, I was scared. I don't know if I was going to get out of it. People were even going to find me in the middle of nowhere. But I had this huge smile on my face that was, I couldn't get it off my face. And it was also like, I knew in my head, I already knew. It was like, man, I don't know what's going to happen from this moment forward, but this is that change you're looking for. This is that moment that you're always going to remember. This is that day where everything changed. And
It's
sure
the faith
enough,
and the courage.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
that are, yeah, most people do not have that much of a sound head in that moment. And the common theme that I'm noticing throughout your entire story is, I don't know if you know this or if anybody's ever told you this, but you can spot trends.
Okay.
You can spot things like right when they're starting to percolate and happen. And it seems like you spotted that LA was going to be a mess before we are where we're at now. We were just in LA last year visiting his mom, and we're like, what happened here? This is bad. But also trends in industries and things like that, you were starting to pick up on it. And it seems, because I've heard you talk about this on the channel, we've talked about it on the channel. It's part of what exploded the channel, because we just were like, fuck it, we have to be honest with the audience, which is things are not looking good in the United States, and one could argue the West in general right now. And it seems that you started picking up on that. I mean, you've been in here 6 years already. Just like
Yeah.
Justin started picking up on it, and he's been in and out of the U.S. for years. Some of us, it took a little longer. So what are you seeing where you're like, hey, people, if you want to move to Mexico, and not just Mexico, anywhere, as an American, you better start making some plans and you better start moving, literally.
Well, by the way, no one's ever really told me that. Thank you. I appreciate that, because again, if you can literally go to my old YouTube channel, see my first videos, and see the things that I was talking about, like technology and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'm still in shock to see, how I predicted a lot of things, because again, I was out there in that space, and, just predicting a bunch of things that happened, with technology that we take for granted already in some aspects. And even now when, talking about, like, I know earlier before we went live, we were talking about artificial intelligence, and I use AI. When most people are still like afraid of these things. But back then I already saw the writing on the wall. I already started to see things. But what happens is that you lie to yourself. A lot of people lie to themselves, and we think, well, it's not that bad. Well, things are going to get better. Well,
Where
yada,
else am I
yada,
going to
yada.
go?
Where
Everywhere
else am I
else
going
is
to
worse.
go? That's
Yeah.
right.
It's the
All those
boiling
things.
frog.
That's right. That's right. But eventually, like I said, that's why I never, left or anything like that. And eventually it wasn't up until, the whole situation in Texas happened to me, and I was able to get out of it. Thank God for my American Express business card, but anyways, I was able to get out of it. And once I got out of it, I ended up in LA, and, I was just kind of, going through the motions, just trying to, deal with that Texas situation, get back on my feet. And I noticed for the first time in my life, it's like, hey, this is not going in the right direction. Meaning it's like, yeah, I'm working hard, I'm paying this off, I'm dealing with all this. But, usually kind of like expecting like an upward trajectory. It might not be much, but at least, you're kind of moving in that direction. But that's not what was happening. It was actually going backwards and backwards. And I was already, again, I mean, I'm a little older, you know what I mean? So like I was already, I already went through the 2008, 2007, whatever, debacle in the USA. I was in Florida. We lost a lot. And I remember,
we sure did.
yeah.
Yep.
And I remember when I first started working, okay, as a dumb cook, okay, I didn't even know how to cook. And I was getting paid like 12, 13 bucks an hour. And then after the 2007, 2008 thing, I already had my catering business. I had a really nice job, working in a really nice hotel, the whole thing. I lost everything, because the economy went to the crapper. And then when I was like, all right, I lost everything, let's rebuild again. And I was working 3 jobs, okay? And those 3 jobs, I couldn't even get one of the jobs to pay me 12 bucks an hour. You know what I mean? And this is already with, a giant resume, all this, information, all this other stuff. And I was like, man, this is no bueno. I moved to Seattle. I started seeing it from a different perspective over there. I just started seeing all the pieces. But like one of the things that, I'm sorry, I know I sometimes I talk a lot, but what I was going to say is that one of the things that one of the liberties, one of the freedoms that bought me, that that I was able to afford when I was working in Seattle, doing the consulting, I started to have more time. When you're a cook or a chef, I mean, you're basically married to the kitchen. You don't have any free time. But when I was, just helping people with the consulting, I had more free time. So I was reading, I was watching YouTube videos, I was going down that rabbit hole. Plus, again, you and me, Amanda, we're Cuban, and same as you, Justin. Again, your parents come from Ukraine. That whole situation where we got our parents and our grandparents, and we got family that told us about the horrors of communism. and the horrors of,
Of
certain things.
authoritarianism.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
not just communism, but just a complete abuse of power.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so as I started to see, all the dominoes start to fall, I was like, "Oof, this is no bueno." And then eventually, again, I ended up in LA, and I started to see things really, really bad. And so, to me, I was already kind of again. This is what my original channel was all about. This is why it's not no longer available. But basically, I was predicting a lot of the things that happened before even COVID. I was expecting some lockdowns. I was expecting martial law. I was expecting them to start cracking down on people, for saying certain things. Basically, the world that we're living in today. I was, talking about that stuff before or even thinking about it. But again, I was the crazy one. It's like, no, Jose, those things are not going to happen. I'll talk to my Cuban family back home. Hey, bro, come on. There's no communism here. None of this is going to happen. Yada, yada, yada. But then you already know what happened. The COVID thing happened. All the things that have happened since then. And now all of a sudden, people are not questioning these things anymore. In fact, they're like, oh, it's real. Oh, it's happening. Oh, now what? What are we going to do? How can we escape this? What are our options? All this stuff like that. And, the way I'm looking at it right now is like, look, I'm always an optimist. I'm, a provincial, what's the word I'm looking for?
Eternal optimist.
Eternal optimist. And so with that being said, I'm always really, thinking everything's going to be fine in the USA, meaning, we're going to go through some hard times, these hard times that are happening right now that are going to get worse, but eventually we'll make it out of it. But at the end of the day, the one constant thing is that it's just going to keep getting worse. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. And so if it does get better, great, but we don't know if it's going to get better. And that's the thing. That to me is enough, uncertainty to not want to be there, to not really invest too much in, the U.S. as it comes to like, hey, I'm going to buy a home, start a family there, start a business there. And again, here's the kicker. Even if you are trying to start a business, buy a home, do any of these things in the U.S., you can't even do these things anymore in the USA. So the thing is that at the end of the day, most people are starting to realize that they're just one paycheck away. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what their income is, but they're just one emergency away, or missing one paycheck, away from they themselves losing what they have, losing, all the things that they worked for, ending up on the street, and I could go on and on. Again, you could just say the wrong thing to the wrong person at work, trying to joke around the water cooler, and before you know it, HR is calling you in. Before you know it, you're already getting those food stamps, and you're not going to be able to get another job. Just because now you got dinged because you said something, or you thought something, or you're not the right color, right? Because
Yeah.
now, they're going after people, for whatever it is.
All kinds of stuff. And it's interesting. It's just like chaos being planted all the time, which is one of the things that we talk about. And two interesting things. So one, I don't know if you saw the video, but we have a video on the channel that said moving to Mexico or anywhere is going to get harder for Americans.
Yeah.
And we talked about all the stuff going on in the United States. We talked about like we have all this stuff going on. And now on top of that, we just had an assassination attempt. The sitting president just stepped down. Now they put someone in that literally no one voted for. These are not good signs.
Right. And look at what you were saying about like not being able to leave. That's a very real thing that I used to say years ago, and people thought it was crazy. But again, remember on my channel, I talk to people from all over, doing, with all kinds of backgrounds in life, and some people they can't even get a passport. They're denied a passport just because of some
If you owe taxes,
crap.
yeah.
Taxes or child support. And by the way, not that they didn't pay child support. No. Some states are very, awful, with child support and alimony, meaning the kid is like 32 years old, already, with a job and a wife and somehow you still got to pay child support. You still got to pay alimony. You still got to pay something. You got to do something. And, a lot of people, they get their wages garnished, because of, school loans or, other, kind of situations like that. And there's so many reasons and as to why so many people cannot even get their passport. So it's already happening. And I was actually so surprised, because I just thought, oh, well, if you got a felony or if you have like a couple little things, okay, you can't get a passport. But no, there's so many people that are getting denied to even get a passport, just regular citizens. Not just that, but again, just regular citizens, a mom with her kids gets pulled over by a cop the cop is having a bad day, and before you know it, now mom is in the system. Now they're going to threaten to take away the kids, yada, yada, yada. While at the same time, there's actual real crimes happening, right? And, the cops nowhere to be found, but then again, don't be littering or don't be doing something arbitrary because they're going to come after you and make your life a living hell. And basically, from my, it's something that I kind of knew years ago, but it's really, really prevalent today where it's like the more you try to be a good citizen, the more the system screws you, okay? And it almost forces you to be a bad actor, okay? Or do, shady things that you wouldn't want to do. And that's starting to put a lot of people in these positions that they don't want to be in. And it's like, come on, a lot of people are just like, hey, I just wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to have a family, or I just wanted to be a plumber, or I just wanted to have my regular, what is it, American dream, American lifestyle out here. And it's not available anymore. In fact, increasingly, it's getting more and more difficult to even live a normal life. And a lot of people are looking for a way out. And when they're looking for that way out, they're starting to see, oh, wait a minute, there's no way out. I can't get out of here because there's always something. And I've made videos and specifically on this topic where, when you start actually taking the steps to move out, all of a sudden you start seeing all the difficulties, that start arising in moving out. Okay. And this, you guys just moved out here recently and it's difficult. And even by living in Mexico, you're not removed from the USA. You're still tied to them. Go ahead and start ignoring the USA or start not doing your taxes or whatever it is. And you're going to see how, you're going to get a knock on your door no matter where you are, and they're going to be like, hey, Amanda, listen, we saw that you haven't done your taxes. We see money coming into the bank. What's going on? Whatever it is,
Yeah. You bring up so many things. I mean, I know Justin could probably speak ad nauseum about everything that you just said. It seems like the two of you have a lot in common with what you're seeing. But one of the things that we noticed on that video where we said it's going to keep getting harder for Americans, you don't really have a lot of time. And one of the things we noticed in the comments for people were like fighting over which candidate was going to fix the problem. And we're like, y'all are still in the matrix. Right. None of these candidates are going to fix this problem.
Nope.
Yeah. And even recently in some of my videos and live streams I was doing, just talking, about, just being in the middle, but just kind of like letting people know what you just said there. Hey, look, they're both on the same team. Be careful. Oh my God, people just lose their mind. They're just so...
They lose their minds. Yeah. And we were looking at that video, we're like, oh, we can tell who's still in the matrix, because the point that we were trying to make was like the systems are failing and the systems are broken. Right. It doesn't matter who you vote in. Right. Even if they try to change it, they'll probably try and kill them. Like that's just where we're at with this situation. If you look at the cycles of history. And then, Justin, if you want to speak to this, because we were literally just watching a video the other day that right now the United States is experiencing a lot of the same things that the Roman Empire was experiencing right before it fell.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting looking at everything from another country, because when you're in the matrix, it's really tough not only to have a truly objective opinion on everything, but also just emotionally. It's like, we're not at a position where we can easily just say, oh yeah, everything is going to hell in a handbasket and still be in the matrix, because then we have to question our very livelihood and our existence and say, all right, well, if that's going to happen, then what am I doing to change my situation? And when people aren't willing to take personal responsibility and really look at, now some categories of people I'm sure will be fine staying in the US. If you're incredibly wealthy, you've got a business that depends on you being there in person, you're a doctor, you're maybe a lawyer and you can't work remotely for whatever reason, and you're making multiple, like high six figures, sure, maybe you're better off staying there, because even though you're spending a lot more to live and even though you're dealing with a bunch of BS where you're at now, maybe it's worth it. Even I would argue that that's a whole other aspect of the rat race, that like, do you really want to be in a profession that depends on you having to show up, and if you don't show up, your money just stops? Like, is that the best way to do it? I don't think it is. But the vast majority of people, I think, would be very smart. And it's not saying, come out and move to Mexico necessarily. It's just looking at, are the structures in your life and your business and the way you're making money and the way you're saving and investing money, like, is everything actually sound? Because if you couldn't do what you did, Jose, where in a couple weeks you're like, bam, I'm just going to move to this other place. I did something very similar multiple times in my life. But if you don't have the structure in your life, or maybe you're working a dead-end job you're not happy at, and you don't have any savings, you don't have any investments, you can't make money remotely, or at least you haven't set that up in advance, it's going to be too late by the time you actually try to start getting that ball rolling. That's why we encourage our clients so much to build all these systems, build these businesses, build everything in advance, so that when shit really does hit the fan, you're actually ready. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but it's like you look at the dominoes and they're falling. Will the U.S. collapse in the next 10 years? I don't know, probably not, but it's certainly not going to get better anytime soon.
Yeah, and that's just the internal stuff. What about Jose, I'm sure you've noticed this too, now living outside of the United States and hearing different perspectives. What a lot of Americans don't realize, because there's not really a culture of understanding what goes on in other parts of the world and other countries, is that the United States is no longer like the number one superpower where Europe just follows everything the United States does and then they run everything. We're increasingly moving into a more multipolar world where there's a lot more competition, or for example, BRICS, right? Where there was a rumor that Mexico is interested in joining BRICS. It's a rumor, it's not been confirmed. But for those of you who don't know what BRICS is, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa that they got together, and they're moving away toward away from the dollarization. Or the Saudis just stopped their petrodollar contract. A lot of Americans don't know this, right? They notice all the problems that are going on internally, but they don't realize that the geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape of the rest of the world is changing really fast. And all of that affects their ability to remain number one, which is what Americans have been taught their whole lives.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number one.
But you said it though. A lot of people, unfortunately, in the USA, they're like insulated. They're in that little bubble in the USA. And again, we were in that bubble. We lived there. We know how it is. But it's like the minute you step out of it and you get to see, especially us, we get to see everything from the outside perspective now. You realize, very, very, very quickly that there's a whole other world out there that doesn't even need the USA. In fact, that it's more like the USA is like a cancer, to many countries and many parts of the world at the moment. And, right now, again, the world is changing, like dramatically, drastically. And for example, one complaint that I get a lot, I'm sure you guys have heard it as well already, where a lot of Americans are coming to Mexico and they're saying, oh, Mexico's too expensive these days. Mexico is more expensive, blah, blah, blah. And the reality is that, yeah, that's partially true because, inflation, there's, these things that are, basically controlling that. But at the end of the day, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the dollar is not as valuable anymore. The fact is that the USA empire, in which, the peso and all these things are compared to, they're not as strong anymore. And now Mexico and other countries, they're getting stronger. They're getting, economically powerful and so on and so forth. And so it's that hard pill to swallow for a lot of Americans, or a lot of people that, basically Americans and Canadians that come out to, like, let's say Mexico, and they're expecting everything to be dirt cheap and for people to be living in dirt huts and to be picked up, by a donkey at the airport and all this stuff, you know what I mean? And then when they come out here and they realize, oh, wait a minute, the cars here are nicer and fancier. Oh, wait a minute, the people here are living nicer and they have more freedom or more ability to maneuver themselves. Because even if you're all the way at the bottom of the economic totem pole here, you're selling avocados on the side of the street.
Aquí no hay hambre.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to go
Aquí
hungry.
No hay hambre.
Yeah, and so that's what I was trying to get at. You can at least sell your avocados on the side of the street. Try selling avocados on the side of the street in the USA in most places, and you're going to see how very quickly, they're going to come out there and take your avocados, make guacamole out of it right there in front of you, arrest you, do the, basically, set an example of you, because how dare you, not work for somebody? How dare you, try to start your own thing? Where's your licenses? Where are your permits? What if somebody gets sick, from the avocado? All these rules and regulation that basically don't allow people to, ¿cómo se dice? Grow, you know what I mean? To basically, have financial freedom. Because that was one of the big things that made the USA such an amazing place to live. is that you could come from anywhere on the planet, land in the USA. You didn't even have to speak English. As long as you worked hard and you were willing to make it happen, you could make it happen. But that's
Well, yeah,
not,
like our parents and grandparents. But then for our generation,
It's not like
because
that.
of bad legislation, bad foreign policy, bad economics,
Radical agendas.
radical agendas, like it's just non-existent
Right.
at this point.
Yeah, and so it makes it very difficult. And so that's the thing out here. People can they still have that freedom. The economic freedom where they can start a business, they can work for themselves, they can do hustle. Go out there and do whatever it is they got to do, and the cost of entry. You know what I mean? Meaning the cost to start a business, the cost of many things are not as crazy high as the USA. But just to finish the cost of living thing. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like things are getting more expensive here, but that's because life is getting better out here, and life is getting worse in the USA. And so, obviously, it's going to cost more money to live, better out here. But you're not paying as much in rent. Again, for the house that I'm living in, I'm paying $350 a month for a 2-bedroom house.
Wow.
Bro, you can't even rent a lot to put your motor home. Okay, for $350.
I was
in the
paying
USA.
that for storage in Austin for my
you know what I
stuff
mean?
in my car.
So it's just things like that. And so, there's many things that are basically making it worse and worse for the typical American these days. And this is why even with the immigrant situation, you're seeing that they're getting immigrants, a lot of them that are coming from really, really, really horrible situations, because you're not seeing a typical Mexican go to the USA anymore.
No,
in
you're
fact,
not.
the Mexicans,
typical they're coming back.
Yeah, because they're like, life is better out here. I got more opportunity to make more money here, and yada, yada, yada. So, and a lot of Latinos, there's a lot of Cubans coming out here from Miami. There's all kinds of people from Latin America in Miami.
Argentines, a lot of Argentines here. A lot of people from India getting tech jobs here. It's interesting that you bring up immigration in the United States, because we have 2 stories from friends recently. The girl who does my nails said this interesting story. She goes, I could have 2 Mexican friends, both trying to get visas to the United States. One of them, no tiene ni donde caerse muerta. She's got nothing, no money, no nothing, no job, nothing. And they give her a visa. And then the one that has savings, investments, no criminal record, they don't give her a visa. What the hell is going on? Even the Mexicans are confused about what is going on in the United States, because that's not how it rolls here for immigration. Ask us how we know that. And then in addition to that, we heard another story from one of our classmates that her father sells cars here in Mexico, and she often has to travel to the United States to get parts and things, because the US, Canada, and Mexico have an interesting trade relationship for cars. And she was recently in South Carolina, and she came back. She goes, look, I need to ask you guys something. Number 1, I need to find an immigration attorney for a friend. But number 2, what the hell is going on over there? And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, I was just in South Carolina. There's literal prostitutes on the street and people selling drugs, and people from all these dirt poor countries, her words, not mine, dirt poor countries who have nothing to contribute to a society, and they're everywhere. What is going on over there? Or they go to LA because they have family in LA, and they're like, what happened to LA?
Yeah. No, and look, and it's funny you mentioned that, because there's this running joke between the Latino community, where basically it's like, if, let's say you're an Argentinian, right? And you're traveling to the USA, on an airplane, you're crossing the border, through the, immigration office, the US immigration, whatever. And how they're basically, asking all these questions, let me check your bags, let me this, let me that, let me whatever. And they're making it almost impossible. In fact, sometimes they even turn you away from coming into the USA legally, correctly. You're actually there to, bring something useful to the USA, whatever it is. They make it very difficult for you. But again, as you just cross the border, you just go to the border and you have no paperwork, no nothing, no whatever. And they basically put you on a bus. They give you some money. They give you a cell phone. They it's like, where do you want to go? And it's like, what is going on here? I mean, I often joke and I say, one of the things that I want to do is I want to get my Mexican citizenship. And once I get my Mexican citizenship, I'm going to renounce my U.S. citizenship, only so I can go to the border and just cross back and forth and, get my paycheck, get my free stuff too.
Your Obama phone.
Yeah,
at the border,
or at the
right?
very least, get some job in the USA, and then, whatever, get deported, whatever. But yeah, what? Oh, sorry. No, but what I was gonna say is just the disparity between immigrants. between, like the high value immigrants, they're put through the ringer. They're giving them a more difficult situation. And then the ones that, basically are coming in illegally, they're allowed to come illegally. They're encouraged to,
Let's get really interesting here. I'm just curious because we have our own perspectives when we don't really get too political ourselves. And I'm not saying go like super, super, super deep, but just on the surface level, like, why do you think that is? Because clearly there's something going on here. What's
No, well, honestly,
yeah? Why do you think they're doing all
okay,
that?
okay. So that what Amanda said is what they want you to believe, and obviously it's causing that. We know it's causing chaos, but if you just look at U.S. history a little bit, you go a little deep. There's waves of immigration that come into the U.S. Again, we were part of that. Our parents were part of that. Again, the Cubans. Look at Scarface, right? Or look at that, era in time. You can go back a little further. You don't have to go back that far. But anyways, there's always waves, okay, of immigration that comes in. Sometimes they're bigger than others. What I see, what I think is happening is that basically right now, a typical American doesn't want to work, for the little pay and the little, what is it like, reward that they would get for being in the workforce in the USA. Why would they? And so basically the US, they're kind of desperate. They need people to work. They need people to do things. They need people to work at the, old people's home to wipe, butts, whatever it is. They need a lot of low-level remedial jobs that a lot of immigrants are more than happy to do. They'll be more than willing to do these jobs because, again, to them, think about it. Let's say they're getting paid $15 an hour. $15 an hour to a typical American born in the USA, that's like an insult. That's like a slap to the face, especially with how expensive everything is these days. Unless you're like 18 working at McDonald's, all right? But other than that, it's basically an insult. But I mean, think about an immigrant. Where $15 an hour, it's like, man, $15, man, that's what I used to make a week, or a day, or whatever it is. And now I can make this an hour. And what do I got to do? Put up with some boomers, put up with a few Karens. What? Make some, what's that? McDonald's French fries? I mean, come on. Or work in the fields, or work some, under the table job. So that's why they're bringing in, I feel, a lot of immigrants, to replace, a lot of individuals out there that are not in the workforce anymore. That's number one, I think. Also, the USA is unique compared to other countries. Other countries, remember, they got that demographic situation, meaning that, okay, look at Japan. You go to Japan or China, and you see that they have like a lot of old people, and they don't have enough young people, and the young people don't want to work, and the old people, well, they can't work, and basically, all these old people are going to start, demanding their Social Security, or you got to take care of me, you got to whatever. So it's causing that rift. And again, now these young people don't want to work because they're like, well, I got to work to take care of these old people that didn't even take care of me when I was young, like that whole thing. So that dynamic is happening in many parts of the world. But what saves the USA is immigrants. Remember, you're not going to see waves of immigration going into China or Japan or anything like that. And they're not going to be as accepted, again, in a lot of these countries.
It's extraordinarily difficult to become a naturalized citizen in Asia.
Yeah. And so, but also the cultural differences. Remember, in the USA, it's a melting pot. That's why I always laugh, when people are like, oh, the USA is racist. It's like, no. Have you been to any other country? Have you seen how they are? You go to Japan. You can see, they're nice and they're very racist, okay? So it's like, but anyways, the point I'm making is that I feel like that's part of it, okay? I feel like really that's part of it. Also, a lot of people, you know what I mean? They think that we're about to hit a civil war in the USA. Spoiler alert, the civil war is already happening. I'm sure you have a lot of friends and family that they probably have like situations where they can't even talk to their child anymore. You know what I mean? Just because, their child is, leaning once, to the left or to the right of the political spectrum. And their parents are to the left or to the right. And they can't even have a normal conversation. If you studied the U.S. Civil War, I mean, families were destroyed all over the place just because of their, political leanings. And so I see that that's already happening. We already see it. It's already happening. It's a daily thing in the USA these days. Now, it doesn't happen everywhere. It's not like a major thing. Obviously, if you watch enough news, they're going to make you think things are crazily horrible in the USA. Again, they are pretty bad. But to me, it's like this. What's really going on is that they're trying to get the USA the people in power, in my opinion, my dumbass opinion, they're trying to get everybody on the same page. But as you guys know, coming from the USA, nobody's on the same page. Everybody's angry
Right,
about
exactly.
something. And they're all just fighting against each other over the most idiotic things. And so think about it. All of a sudden, you're going to start getting, we have like an influx of like, 11 million immigrants into the USA. A lot of them come from, as your friend put it, shithole countries or communist countries or, war-torn countries or whatever it is. And, now they're landing in the USA, the land of milk and honey. Sure, they're seeing what we're seeing, but compared to where they come from, this is great. This is wonderful. You kidding me? I don't have to walk on a dirt floor in my house. I actually got tile now, tile or carpet or whatever it is. And I can go on and on. So these immigrants, again, just like our parents and other generations before that, they're going to protect that, freedom or that democracy or that, again, whatever, again, we can talk about that, as well, as to whether it really exists or not, or, we have a free country or not. But at the end of the day, all these immigrants, they're coming into the USA, America now, and the people in power are counting on that. The fact that these are now going to be, a fresh batch of Americans starting a fresh new cycle. They're all going to love America. They're not going to be putting up with, all this bickering and back and forth. Let the actual Americans that are from here keep bickering with themselves. But, we want to, set up shop here. For example, you go to like places like, let's say to go to Detroit, Michigan, and it's all Muslims there. You know what I mean? Now, and all of a sudden now, you're not seeing any of the left, woke culture up there. Well, because all these Muslims took over, they come from with a very conservative background and, their religion, their lifestyle, culture, all this stuff. And now they're setting up shop and they're basically taking over. And a lot of people, again, if you're looking at it from depending on how you look at it, will depend on how favorably you look at this. Because remember, the Cubans took over Miami. You know what I mean?
Yes, we did.
Or the Italians, the Italians took over the East Coast, or the people from Ireland, and so on and so forth. And so, and then they bring these values with them. They bring these things with them that don't align with what's going on in the USA these days. You talk to a lot of these young kids that come from Yemen, Somalia, wherever, even freaking El Salvador or whatever. And all of a sudden they're like, no, of course, we're going to protect this. If we got to go to war and protect freedom, or if we're going to, whatever, get angry at, my white friend, Tim, you know what I mean? Just because, he wants to go to civil war or whatever. It's like, no, we're not going to civil war. You know what I mean? I just came from a civil war. I just came from, from communism. It's like, no, so I feel like a lot of these immigrants, they're brought in just simply in order to, they're trying to get everybody on the same page. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people out there, Americans, been there for a long time, and they've already lost faith. Even me, even you, we're just first generation. You guys, we're all first generation Americans, and we're out of there already. So think about that.
That actually says a lot, because Americans used to stay for generations and generations and generations. What's ironic about everything that you're saying, because we just went through the immigration process in Mexico and we were just with our attorney yesterday, is that Mexico's immigration policies are the exact opposite of the United States right now. Right. They're like, we want people with money. That's the only people we want coming into Mexico. One final question to just kind of put a pin in all this, and we have a couple minutes left. A lot of people are going to hear this and they're going to get very emotional. I think the three of us have gotten to a point where we're just not emotional about it anymore. We're just like, here's the chessboard, here are the pieces, here's what's going on. I'm going to make tactical decisions moving forward based on how the pieces are moving. Like, we're beyond the emotions. How would you recommend that somebody start moving beyond those emotions? Because a lot of people will be like, I'm going to stay and fight. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but it doesn't stop this multipolar, whole world changing U.S. not being the number one superpower anymore, because that's a whole other issue y'all don't even know about. So what would you say to people so that they can maybe start coming out of the emotions of all of this and then just start making those tactical decisions? And what I mean by tactical is making the decision that makes the most sense for them based on what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. And it's going to vary depending on the individual. Yes and no. Look, at the end of the day, it's like this. there's another YouTuber out there, the Nomad Capitalist. I don't know if you heard of him.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
and
Andrew Henderson.
he's
Yeah,
yeah, I love him. He's a great guy. But anyways, he
yeah.
says this one quote that I know a lot of people in the audience might even know already. But it's just basically go where you're treated best. I know a lot of people that are in the U.S. right now that are great. They're happy and everything's working out for them. Some, it's not working out for them. Some, are willing to stay and fight, for what they got for whatever reason or whatever. And I get it. And some are not. The point is that each individual has to assess their own situation. And basically, it's like if you are not having a good time, in the USA theme park at the moment, maybe it's time to pack it up and go. All right. And it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be more difficult to stay. All right. And now, again, if you're single or you're just a couple like you guys, it's a lot easier. You know what I mean? Again, it's a lot easier to make this decision. And then you really just got to, again, ask yourself and be honest with yourself. Am I happy here? Am I going to be able to do what I want to do here? Whatever, whatever it is you want to do, are you going to be able to do it there or not? Like, be realistic. And for most of us, we realize, we know that we're not going to be able to do these things that we want to do, whatever they are. Okay. And so then that's when we start looking into moving abroad, going somewhere else. And so that's number one. But the one thing I want to tell people, there's a lot of people out there that have loved ones, meaning they got kids. They might have, other older family members, whatever it is. And they know that their situation is going to get really bad. And and they might not have the balls, okay, to go out there and do it. But now it's not about you anymore. Now it's about your kids. Now it's about your family. Now it's about all these other things. And now you got to make that sacrifice, okay, in order to provide a better life for them, the best situation for them, and so on and so forth. And, to me, it makes me so happy when I see people our age. And I got tons of friends out here, which is pretty crazy, that they got like 6, 7 kids. I know,
Oh yeah,
like
families are
yeah,
starting to move to
and they're
Mexico, or
starting
just
to,
not even Mexico, just everywhere.
yeah, and
Yeah.
because they're starting to realize, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't want my kids to be taught these things that they're teaching in school over there. Or, I want my kid, to have what's it, like a more fulfilling life, meaning that they can go out and play with the other kids in the neighborhood and not have to worry about XYZ. They can go to the park. They can have normal friendships. All of these things. I mean, look, I was hearing this from a friend of mine in the USA where they want to let their kids out and play. And they live in a gated community in the USA, right? And they want to just let their kids out and play. And they're not allowed to do that because if they let their kids out and play on their own, they're going to get DHS, right? They're going to call the cops on them.
Child Protective Services.
Like, oh, you abandoned your kids. How can you leave your kids out there playing on the playground or in front of your house on their own? And I could go on and on. So if you got a family, even if you got sometimes some people have in my case, I got my mom. You know what I mean? And my mom is doing great. She's happy over there in Miami. But if it really, the crap really hits the fan, I have no doubt that she'll, without even thinking about it, come out here and live with me. Meaning live out here in a place that she can easily assimilate to. So again, everybody has their own kind of situation. But to me, it's about that. It's like, you're gonna be honest with yourself, and you're gonna ask yourself that question as to am I happy here? Am I gonna be able to fulfill my dreams here? Am I going to, be able to really live the life that I want to live here? And for most people, when they start asking those questions, they're going to quickly realize that no, that they're not going to be able to do those things. And on top of that, it's about the adventure. You live once. It's just one life, live life, and a lot of people, they might be rich on paper. I got an expensive house, or I'm rich, and they got a couple bucks in their pocket, but are they rich in life? Is their life rich? Is it fulfilled? Can they actually look? This is something that I tell people all the time. It's like this. Like right now, again, God forbid, knock on wood, all right? Nothing happens, right? But let's say that something were to happen to me and I'm gone tomorrow. I'm on my deathbed tomorrow, right? I can actually sit there in my deathbed with a big smile on my face and be like, yeah, man, I had some adventures. Man, I can't believe it ended so quick, but whatever. You know what I mean? I got the most out of it. I squeezed the most out of that sponge, before, the Grim Reaper came out here to pick me up. But how many people can actually say that? Many people that are in their 60s or 70s, and they still haven't even lived their life. Now they're about to retire and start living that life. And to me, that is one of the saddest things, is seeing people that are older already and they realize that they've wasted their life. They wasted the best years of their life. They wasted, being with their children, their family, going on adventures, real vacations. Not just like a 1 week, vacation that you get from your corporate job and yada yada, and you're still working while you're out there. No, no, no. Like really, be able to enjoy your life, your family, your kids, whatever it is. A lot of people just they never get to do that. So for me, it's that. I think right now more than ever, most people are not enjoying their time in the USA. Things are not fun. Things suck. They're not making enough money. I could go on and on. The list is endless, okay? And depending on who you ask, depending on how big or their list is, but at the end of the day, even if it's just for the fact that hey, I'm leaving and I'm gonna have an adventure, I'm gonna live my life. I'm just gonna go with the flow, whatever it is. That's reason enough. All right. And by the way, this is why I was happy that you guys came in contact with me and that we're collaborating on all this stuff because you're also part of that piece of the puzzle. Because it's all fun. What I just said. It's like, yeah, okay, just leave and go live life. Go and be in Bali or Tulum or whatever. And at the end of the day, you gotta know. I mean, you gotta still make some money. All right, you still gotta pay the bills and so on and so forth. But once you're living out here, at the very least, you know that your world does not have to revolve around that. Okay, yeah, it's part of it's part of life. Again, whether you're selling avocados or you're selling trinkets on Amazon, it doesn't matter. You got to do something, but it doesn't have to be your complete life. Where you're just working and you don't get to enjoy anything. Out here, you get to enjoy things. In fact, one thing about Mexicans that I'm still astonished at is the fact that they work hard. In fact, you can look at all the stats. They're some of the hardest, if not the hardest working people on earth. Okay. Outside of, the people in China, working, kind of forced work. But anyways, what I'm saying is that they're some of the hardest working people on earth, but they're also some of the most fun having people on earth. You know what I mean? They work hard, but they play hard. They enjoy family. Sundays are sacred. You know what I'm saying? Like all these things. If they're sick, they don't go to work. They're not worried about getting fired. If they get fired, they work. Yeah. And, again, worst case scenario, they start selling hamburgers. They start selling avocados. They start selling trinkets. They can, again, have more freedom to themselves. So, at the end of the day, it's, just do it. Do it before it's too late. Because, again, the older we get, the quicker time flies. And, you got no time to waste. Again, I came out here 6.5 years ago in my mid-30s. I'm already 43. All right? And, it just time flies. And so that's the thing. Stop thinking about it and start making it happen. It's not going to be easy. It's not. It's going to be difficult. But again, make it, part of the journey. Enjoy it. Have fun with it. I know obviously it's going to be difficult, but again, it's like what you were saying earlier, Justin. It's all about the mental attitude. Okay? It's all about this. Okay? If you got the right attitude and the right mindset, everything else is easy. It's life. Again, you're going to be struggling in the USA. So why struggle doing and living a life that you hate when you can struggle, doing something that you love and enjoying life?
Or eventually not have to struggle
Exactly.
anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great final takeaway for our audience because is it easy to move to another country? No. Is it easy to build a business that can run in part without you? No. And to get rid of that hustle mindset and all these other things that we're kind of tied down by in the US, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's worth it. That's the key at the end of the day is it's actually worth it. And we really appreciate you coming on, Jose, and sharing your perspective. And we're all like essentially first generation, Americans here that our parents were immigrants and we're realizing that maybe when they came to the U.S., it was great, but now it might not be all that it's cracked up to be. So we really appreciate your perspective. We really appreciate the collaboration as well. If people want to follow you, learn more about what you do, see more of your content, what's the best place to find you and what can they expect to see there?
Yeah. So for, again, I have a website, josearteaga.com. So basically my name down there, .com. You can find everything there. I'm on YouTube, Jose Arteaga Travels. I'm sure hopefully you guys will provide the links down below. And basically that's it. You can find me on my website, and then my website, kind of links you to my other app, my other things. And yeah, again, as you guys already know, I try to help people by providing as much information as possible on everything that they're going to need to know on moving to Mexico or not moving to Mexico. At the end of the day, like what I said, I help at the very least get people to think about whether or not, this is the right thing for them. And if it is, what they can do to make it happen. So, but anyways, josearteaga.com.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining us today for another episode of Entrepreneur Expat.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.